Are you viewing this month as a tricky month or something that you can get excited about the possibility of blooding a few youngsters?
Yeah, I think we see it as an exciting opportunity. You see obviously some fresh faces come into the environment, boys who are desperately keen. The learning does tend to go through the roof, and it can push you as well as a coach that you've got to spend time with different people and go through certain things that can obviously help them develop in the month, but also mindful of new players are putting the shirt on, and you've got to cover your bases really in terms of what you're coaching and the information you're trying to impart. So you can't take anything for granted. You know, it's a busy month, but can be one that's fulfilling. And looking at the fixtures, 3 exciting league games, with a couple of good LV games in between, and that competition has been kind to us in development terms in the past. So no, we're pretty excited by it all.
With Gwyn's analysis on Scrum 5, presumably you saw it. What did you think of it? Was it a fair analysis?
I think it's perhaps generic in some ways when you look at it, but there's things there that we would acknowledge, and probably even more so for me, I look at perhaps the block of fixtures we've had, and there was a big shift in terms of the Leinster game, and we have made, as some shrewd observers will look at, some sort of subtle alterations to our game going to Northampton, where some of the understanding was better, albeit the application was out, and then a little shift again in terms of the Dragons mindset. So we do understand there was games where we were too lateral and didn't possess perhaps enough of a threat across the park to go forward or to shift it wide. But I think it's just too generic at times to say we're one-dimensional as a team. I think there's different subtleties that come into play in terms of how we're trying to develop our set-piece game. And we are trying to get some of our firepower on the ball in better positions, but we have got to play a game that suits us in terms of the sort of strength we carry as a team, and we can't necessarily carry a team that can just go all singing, all dancing. So we've got to be smart in what we do, and in terms of who we play against. And I think the Dragons in particular, they've shown this year they haven't conceded any bonus point losses. They've been winning games at home. They pushed a Bath side close the week before. So you've got to do the nuts and bolts of your game really well, and we're happy the way we actually had a good focus around what we did around our set-piece game, and in phase play around 10, 15 on our centres. There was some clarity and understanding of what we're trying to put together, which, to be fair, wasn't necessarily there in the weeks previously, which is in a different high-tempo game, but things that we've had to evolve as we've gone through. And notwithstanding, it's a couple of games have gone past us where we could and maybe should have perhaps put some more points on the board. But there is an element of truth to it, and I'll take that on board. But it's also understanding there's a bigger picture in terms of how we prepare for games and what we're trying to do as a team.
How pleased were you with Matthew Morgan? Obviously, big month, a few opportunities.
Yeah, it was, and he's, to be fair, he's been a constantly good professional behind the scenes. We've made a thing, we have always backed down in that 10 shirt, and he's deserved that on form and what he's done for us. But in terms of the dynamics of the back line with Richard missing, and 15 is an area that we're going to have to look at our succession planning, and we know where we want to go with it, but there's a bit of short-term work that had to be done in terms of getting players on the field. And so Dan suited the mould as a 15, and he was ideal for us in that respect, both positionally and taking the heat off Matthew at certain times. So we had a lot of creative force on the field in between the 15s, which we felt there was lots of inside balls, lots of complement and directness coming from our centres. And it did revolve around a nice triangle of Matthew, Dan, and also Bish and Spratt in the middle. Were quite cohesive for us as well.
How do you see sort of Matthew kicking on with his game? What does he need to do, Griff?
He's working wonderfully well behind the scenes. I think last year we spoke about he's improved his defensive understanding and technically his work in the close quarters there. So he's got to keep that as a constant. He's got to perhaps understand tactically where and what applies in any given situation. That also comes from trusting and having the right level of communication around you. And that's been another underlying thing which hasn't been perfect around the European games. And Dan has taken a lot of responsibility. So it's about sharing the load, and I think last week was about people helping Matthew to actually see the game differently. You know, Dan and, as I said, Spratty and Bish were fundamental to that. So once Matthew learns that element of trust, it's then understanding, you know, when to dip his shoulder and have a go, but when to also perhaps sit back and apply a different skill set.
Richard Russell, you mentioned that he's had a bad back, isn't he? How long is he likely to go for?
He's back training, and you know, he's put his hand up for selection this week. So again, considering the amount of players we lost, which is positive national representation, a senior figure involved in the group is invaluable, both in training terms and, you know, going to Thomond Park, where, you know, perhaps we've got a little bit of youth on our side. He hopefully will be involved.
Yeah. How did you feel Dan Bigger went? He seemed to have a really good game at full back.
Yeah, he did. I was confident. As I said, long term we've got, you know, perhaps different plans for different players there, but in terms of that role for that weekend and that game in particular, you know, we just felt, looking at the Dragons and looking at Matthew deserving of an opportunity to freshen it up, but also Dan's understanding of the backfield play. You know, positionally, he took some options away from the Dragons. He was sweeping up really well. And as we saw, I mean, he's been on the ball around 27 times, I think, which is an extraordinarily high number for the traditional 15. But of course, he's not a traditional 15. And like I said, around the confines of what we wanted for that game, it suited us perfectly. And, you know, we were happy the way we just kept moving ourselves forward with him carrying and people playing off him, you know, and vice versa around the centres, and Matthew Morgan as well.
Yeah. Will that become a regular thing? Might you sort of do that again?
It's something I would explore, also as well around the kicking game. You know, we obviously having 2 10s on the field will give us natural kicking length, and when you cover the bases against certain sides, there's potential for us to win the kicking battle. So, you know, it's something we could potentially explore, notwithstanding the fact, like I said, we have got some options down the line in 15 with people like Ross, Jamie Murphy, Natoga, but as I said, it didn't fit the time and place for them or for us last weekend. But as I said, certain games, having that kicking army on the field can also be a valuable threat for us.
And they did interchange quite a few times, which really keeps the opposition down.
It does, yeah. We've traditionally been a two-sided team, so you need people to step up and offer some different options on both sides, but also that ability then, if you perhaps lose 1-2 backs, which you do in the modern game where backs have to hit rucks as much as back rowers, but it's that ability to regenerate. And obviously as a 10, Dan wanted to be in on the ball as much as anyone, and there are some lessons there for outside backs who sometimes let games pass them by, that you can get involved in areas that suit us as a team.
You go to Munster short of 11 internationals, and you're probably used to that, like how going to these places, but it's still a big challenge.
Yeah, it is. You know, as I said at the start, it's an exciting one. There's a fresh group about us. But yeah, I mean, you look at last week's selection, and I think with the Canadians as well, there's bound to be around 8-9 changes. So that creates a challenge in itself, but an exciting one. I think there's, you know, enough potential within the spine of our side. Looking at, you know, we've still got internationals around Hooker, James King, people who've been there and done a lot of yards on the park for us, people like Morgan Allen, Beerman, Sam Lewis, and still a bit of experience in the back line, as well as potential future internationals, I feel, in the pack, that actually we can have a real good crack at Munster, because obviously they're missing key players as well. And so it does test the depth of both squads, and against a well-coached sides who've evolved over the last year or so, in potentially a nice open game of rugby, you know, we could see a good bit of momentum for us coming into this period.
Griff, do we have some injury updates on some of your guys who are out, like Rees Webb, Arnold Dirks? Are these guys likely to be returning imminently?
Both players, Rees Webb's double sessions today, so he's moving on nicely. Hannah will do the session this afternoon. His training load will always get compromised now, just to manage him long term, you know, but, you know, should be seeing both over the next couple of weeks or so. And the only other one to report from the weekend is Duncan will see a specialist this afternoon about just damaged shoulder. So there's still a bit of pain there. We honestly don't know at the moment. You know, Duncan, he's a Trojan, and you know, he feels he could probably, notwithstanding some nerve pain, probably battle through. But you need to find out if there is any severity there. But we don't know. Unlikely at the moment. But as I said, it's one of those if you get the all clear and then Payne heals in the next 24 hours or so, there's possibility. So, we'll see. Look to Thursday there.
Did you feel that James King was a little bit unlucky to sort of miss out on a Wales spot this Auckland?
From the way we see the game, yeah, I mean, we're obviously really comfortable with him. With having our back five, but especially so the way we've backed him at 5 in terms of his line-out calling is smart in the heat of the moment, and his numbers around the park tend to be excellent. And to be fair, even more so on the weekend, in terms of perhaps a good response last weekend to not being selected, that we saw a bit more from him around the park. There was a bit more of a shared workload. It wasn't just Hibbs and Alan Wynne doing all the work, which, to be fair, they always do manfully, but we actually saw more from King and 1 or 2 others in the pack, which was pleasing. And yeah, we got the highest regard for him, but again, it's a competition for places in Wales, which is to be envied as well.